Xbox just raised the price of old hardware. That is the part that makes this story feel different. A console generation usually gets cheaper as it gets older. The parts become easier to make. The install base gets bigger. The company finds a cheaper revision. The buyer waits a few years and expects the price to move down, or at least stay steady. But Xbox is moving the other way. Starting August 1st, Microsoft says Xbox console prices are increasing worldwide. The 512GB models rise by $100. The 1TB models rise by $150. The 2TB model is being sunsetted entirely. That means the same hardware many players have been looking at for years is about to cost more, not less. And the reason Microsoft gave is bigger than Xbox. The company pointed to storage and memory prices, saying those costs have increased by more than 2.5 times since the last adjustment, and that another doubling is expected by the fall of 2027. Microsoft also said the entire consumer electronics industry is dealing with a component crisis, but consoles feel it especially hard because they are often sold with very thin margins or even below cost. So this is not just a normal price hike story. This is a story about the old console business model running into a new technology economy, and that is why it matters for everyday gamers. If you were planning to buy an Xbox this summer, your deadline just became real. If you are a parent thinking about a holiday console purchase, the budget changed before the holidays even started. If you wanted the highest storage option, that option is disappearing. If you already knew modern games eat through storage, the real price of the console is not just the box. It is the box, the storage, the accessories, the subscription, and the games. That is the first layer. But the deeper question is uncomfortable. What happens if consoles stop behaving like consoles? What happens if they start behaving more like phones, computers, and other consumer electronics, where prices move with memory supply, storage costs, chip demand, and global tech competition? For decades, the emotional promise of a console was stability. You bought the box, and that box gave you a predictable entry point into a generation of games. Maybe there were premium versions. Maybe there were cheaper models. But the general expectation was simple. The console would not become more expensive deep into the generation. Now, that expectation is cracking. Xbox is the immediate proof. But the larger story is the pressure underneath it. Memory is more expensive. Storage is more expensive. AI data centers are fighting for the same supply chain that consumer electronics need. Companies building massive AI infrastructure can pay more for parts than a console maker trying to keep a living room device affordable. That means the gamer is no longer just competing with other gamers for hardware. In a strange way, the gamer is competing with the AI boom, not directly at the store shelf, but upstream, inside the supply chain. And when those costs travel far enough, they land in a place every player understands: the price tag. That is the path this video is going to follow. The official Xbox move is the proof. The buyer math is the immediate pain. The old console pricing pattern is the reason it feels abnormal. The component shortage is the hidden force. And the next generation question is the part that makes this bigger than one platform. If this were only about one company charging more, the story would be simple. But if this is a sign that gaming hardware is now exposed to memory markets, AI infrastructure, and unstable component pricing, then the Xbox announcement becomes a warning flare. The real question is not only whether this price hike is frustrating. The real question is whether the affordable console cycle is starting to break. The most immediate impact is the buyer math. A 512GB console already forces a decision for a lot of players. Modern games are huge. Some of the biggest releases can take more than 100GB before updates, downloadable content, or live service seasons. Add a few major games, a sports title, a shooter, a role-playing game, and a couple of Game Pass experiments, and that storage starts to disappear fast. So when the base hardware gets more expensive, the problem is not only the sticker price, the problem is the total cost of owning the system. A parent buying an Xbox for one child might look at the console price and think the purchase is done. But then the child wants several large games installed. Game Pass adds access to a big library. Some games need regular updates. Suddenly, storage becomes part of the real purchase, even if it was not part of the original plan. That is why the 2 terabyte model being sunsetted matters. It is not just one less option on a product page. It pushes buyers toward lower storage models, higher priced 1 terabyte models, or extra storage purchases later. And Xbox expansion storage has historically carried a premium compared to normal external drives because of how the system handles current generation games. So for the normal buyer, the question becomes simple. Do you buy before August 1st? Do you wait and pay more? Do you buy used? Do you accept less storage? Do you budget for an expansion card? Do you skip the console entirely and rely on personal computer, cloud access, or another platform? That is the kind of decision this announcement creates. And it feels especially strange because console players were trained by older generations to expect the opposite. Think about the usual console story. A system launches at a high price. Early adopters pay the premium. Then, over time, production improves. The company releases bundles. Slim models arrive. Storage changes. The same console becomes easier to buy. Late generation buyers feel rewarded for waiting. That was part of the rhythm. But Xbox Series X launched at $499 in 2020. Years later, the disc model is moving toward a much higher price point. Instead of waiting being rewarded, waiting may now be punished. That is why the reaction is so sharp. Players are not only reacting to the number, they are reacting to the broken expectation. When older hardware costs more, people feel like the rules changed, and the Xbox move is not happening in a vacuum. It follows a prior increase in October 2025. Microsoft said it hoped another increase would not be necessary. Then, less than a year later, another increase arrived, this time with a bigger explanation attached to storage and memory. That tells players something important. This is not just a one-time adjustment. It may be a sign that the cost structure underneath gaming hardware is less stable than it used to be. For someone who already owns an Xbox, maybe this does not change much today. But for anyone outside the ecosystem, or anyone buying for a second room, or anyone waiting for the right deal, it changes the mental math. And once the mental math changes, the platform conversation changes too. A console is not only competing with another console anymore. It is competing with used hardware, handhelds, subscriptions, cloud play, personal computer upgrades, and the idea of waiting longer before upgrading at all. That is where the story starts to widen. There is also a timing problem. The increase takes effect on August 1st. That gives buyers a short window to decide whether they want to move now or accept the new price later. For a household waiting until the holidays, that matters. For a student saving through the summer, that matters. For a parent comparing platforms, that matters. And because the hardware is not new, the reaction becomes more emotional. People understand paying more for a new device. What feels stranger is paying more for an existing console that already had years to settle into the market. The hidden force underneath the price increase is memory. That might sound boring, but it is the part of the story that explains why this is bigger than Xbox. Modern gaming hardware depends on memory and storage. Consoles need it. Personal computers need it. Handhelds need it. Phones need it. Servers need it. AI data centers need enormous amounts of it. And right now, the AI side of the technology industry is pulling very hard on the same supply chain. Business reporting on the memory shortage has described a market where AI data centers are competing with consumer electronics makers for capacity. Big technology companies building AI infrastructure can pay for massive supply agreements. Memory manufacturers have strong reasons to prioritize advanced memory for data centers because those customers are willing to spend heavily. That does not mean every single gaming price increase is caused only by AI. That would be too simple. But it does mean the gaming customer is now exposed to a supply battle that is not really about gaming. The same parts that make a console, personal computer, handheld, or storage upgrade possible are now part of a bigger corporate race to build AI infrastructure. And when that race gets expensive, consumer devices can get squeezed. That is the real twist. A player may not care about data centers. A parent buying a console may not follow memory markets. A kid asking for an Xbox does not care about supply allocation or enterprise buyers. But the final price, can still be shaped by those forces. This is why the topic matters beyond one store shelf. Personal computer builders are already familiar with this feeling. A build that looked affordable last year can suddenly cost more because memory, storage, graphics cards, or power components moved. The personal computer audience is used to prices floating based on the market. Console players are not as used to that. The console was supposed to be the stable alternative. That is what makes this moment feel like a possible turning point. If console pricing starts reacting more openly to component markets, the line between console economics and personal computer economics gets blurrier, and that takes us to PlayStation. Sony has not announced a PlayStation 6 price. The retail price of the next PlayStation is not confirmed. Any number floating around for manufacturing cost should be treated carefully because a bill of materials estimate is not the same thing as a final store price. But Sony has spoken to the larger principle. In a recent investor question and answer, Sony said it does not intend to sell hardware at significant losses, while also saying it is monitoring the market and trying to make sure customers understand the value provided in relation to pricing. That matters because it points in the same direction. Platform holders are becoming less willing to absorb component pressure forever. If the next generation is more expensive to build, companies have choices. They can raise the retail price, they can reduce features, they can delay the launch window, they can create multiple models, they can lean harder into subscriptions, accessories, or premium services. Or they can try to make the value feel obvious enough that players accept a higher entry point. None of those choices are simple. And this is where the future question becomes real. If Xbox prices can rise years into a generation because memory and storage costs move against the company, what happens when the next generation has to be designed from the start inside that same cost environment? That does not mean the PlayStation 6 will cost $1,000. It does not mean every console will suddenly become a luxury item. It does not mean console gaming is dead. But it does mean the old assumption is weaker. The assumption was that time makes gaming hardware cheaper. The new reality may be that time does not help if the parts inside the machine are being pulled into a global technology race. That is a very different world for players. And it is not only about Xbox or PlayStation. Handheld devices, Steam-style living room computers, personal computer builds, storage accessories, and future console revisions can all feel the same pressure. If memory stays expensive, every device that needs it has to answer the same question. Who pays for the increase? The fair counterpoint is that Microsoft may not have many good options. It is easy to say a company should just eat the cost, and sometimes that criticism is fair. These are giant corporations, and players are tired of being asked to pay more for everything. Games cost more, subscriptions cost more, accessories cost more, storage costs more, now hardware costs more too. So the frustration is real, but the business reality is also real. Consoles have often been sold with thin margins or at a loss because the company expects to make money later through games, store purchases, subscriptions, accessories, and long-term platform activity. That strategy works when the loss is predictable and controlled. It becomes harder when key components jump dramatically and keep rising. If a console maker absorbs every increase, the hardware business can become more painful. If it passes the increase to players, the platform becomes less accessible. If it cuts features, players complain about value. If it delays new hardware, software progress slows. If it leans into subscriptions, players worry about ownership and recurring costs. There is no perfect answer. That is why the story is not simply greed versus gamers. The better story is pressure. Pressure on companies trying to price hardware. Pressure on players trying to budget. Pressure on parents trying to buy the right system. Pressure on personal computer builders who are watching parts move out of reach. Pressure on handheld makers trying to offer performance and battery life without creating a luxury product. Pressure on the next generation before it even gets announced. But this is where the boundary matters. We should not overstate it. The confirmed fact is that Xbox console prices rise worldwide on August 1st. The confirmed explanation is that Microsoft is pointing to storage and memory costs, and the company says those costs have risen sharply. It is also confirmed that Sony does not intend to sell hardware at significant losses. it is not confirmed that every future console will follow the same path. It is not confirmed what the PlayStation 6 will cost. It is not fair to say AI demand is the only cause of every price move. It is not honest to claim console gaming is dying. Players still have choices. Some people can buy before August. Some can wait for refurbished systems. Some can buy used. Some can stay with current hardware longer. Some can use Game Pass or cloud options. Some can move toward personal computer. Some can choose Nintendo hardware. Some can skip the newest device until the value makes sense. But the mental model should change. When you buy gaming hardware now, you should think about total cost, not just sticker price. How much storage do you need? How many large games do you keep installed? Will you need expansion storage? Are you buying for one player or multiple people? Is the console still the best value after accessories? Would a subscription help? Or does it become another monthly cost? Can you wait? Or does waiting risk paying more? That is the practical takeaway. The old console cycle trained players to think patience would usually save money. This Xbox announcement challenges that idea. It suggests that gaming hardware may now be more exposed to the same unstable pricing forces that shape phones, laptops, memory, storage, and personal computer parts. That does not make the hobby impossible, but it makes the hobby less predictable. And that is exactly the kind of story GamingRealm is built to explain. Not just the headline, but the system behind the headline. The broader Game Plan by Dylon ecosystem is built around that same idea. Take messy information, organize it into a clear structure, and help people make sense of what is actually changing. The final answer is this. Xbox is charging more for old hardware because the cost structure behind gaming hardware is changing. Memory and storage pressure are not invisible anymore. AI demand, consumer electronics competition, and thin console margins are starting to land directly on the player wallet. Maybe this is a temporary spike. Maybe supply improves. Maybe competition forces better deals later. But now, the signal is clear. The era where consoles naturally became cheaper as they aged is no longer guaranteed. And for everyday gamers, that means the smartest question is no longer just, what console should I buy? The smarter question is, what will this system actually cost me over time?